even buy any, and it's,
We're good.
Now, are we on? All right, so this is our second budget work session. It's March 1st, 2022, 6 o'clock, we're starting. And can we bring up the slides, Madam Clerk? So you each, council members, you have a packet there that follows along, so you don't have to crane your neck looking at the TV screen. The TV screen is for our home audience, as well as we have department heads that are here with us today. So what are we doing today in this budget work session? We're trying to build a good foundation for you. So the thing that we know about budgets is that what you do when you put the budget together is what gives the people in this room the authority to do what they do in their departments. So when we do a general fund budget that includes Department of Public Service, what you're actually doing is you're saying to the department what you want them to do. Whether it's their enterprise fund budget, whether it's their general fund budget, you're saying, go fix alleys, go fix roads, go do this. When you give a budget to the HR director, you're saying, go do employee training. The police department, you enable these department heads to do their job. So that's the function of a budget. So today, what are we doing? We're gonna look back at a year in review. We're gonna look ahead to next year. We're gonna review our 5-year forecast, and our goal is always to adopt a balanced budget, okay? And we need to do that by our charter by June 2nd, but our goal is May 10th. So the first thing we're gonna start with is good news. Well, we should have moved a little bit. We should have moved a little bit already. Next slide. So we're gonna start with good news. So you've heard about the American Rescue Plan Act dollars. People call them ARPA, they may call them ARP. We will be receiving $2.1 million in those funds. Those funds have not been dedicated to any project, to any department, or to a plan at this time. And as you have been learning at MML, and as we've been talking about for the last couple of years, we would like to use those one-time funds to leverage more money. So we're applying for grants, and typically when you apply for a grant, they'll say, we need a 25% match. We need a 50% match. We need a 10% match. We need a labor match. Those dollars will be the right dollars to use for that, because we don't have a lot of match dollars. The CARES Act fund, now those are funds that we received last year. It was a little over $1 million during the 2021 fiscal year. Those reduced the draw that we had in our last budget year from our fund balance. So we went into budgeting a year ago, 2 years ago, drawing off of fund balance. But because we received these dollars, it reduced the amount of fund balance that we had to dip into, and you'll see that later. These are one-time funds. So what we still need to do is look at a sustainable general fund revenue and that needs to be our priority together. What is the way that we bring more dollars in? At our first budget meeting, at our Plant Moran overview that we had a week ago, the problem identified was not our expenditures, because we're very lean. When I say very lean, it means we're not spending a lot of money to run the city. These people are doing an excellent job with very small budgets. What it means is that we don't have enough revenue for a city our size to provide the services that you want to give to your residents. So next slide, we're going to look at grant awards that we've received. Why do we look at grant awards? The reason we look at grant awards is because of what I just said. We do not have general fund revenue on our own that is enough to run this city. Without grants, we can do very little, other than pick up the trash, do some street work. We can do very little. The extra things that you see are because of grants. It's not because we're taking in so much money. So I'm going to rattle these off because people in this room and a few people that aren't in this room are the reason we have these grants, and I want to applaud them and give them credit for the work they do. I mean, it's important to thank these department heads for the work they do that makes this city run better than it could have without doing this. It takes a lot of work to apply for a grant. It takes a lot of work to manage a grant. but we have staff that are willing to do that. And the biggest portion of that is in our finance department. So every one of the people that apply for grants has to go through Susan. And I will tell you, without her, we would be nowhere when it comes to finance. So we received the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative subgrant from the DNR for tree planting, $9,860. The Summer Youth Program from DWIN, the Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network, $45,000. We've applied for that again this year. The FDCVT grant, which is for financially distressed cities, for the body cams, $111,000 worth of that. The AARP challenge grant for bus benches and a transportation plan, $15,500. MML Bridge Builders for the bike racks and the bike rack competition, $5,000. A CDBG Community Development Block Grant for code enforcement, $20,000. That offsets what we pay for salaries. Straight up is salaries. Our alley resurfacing and mural grant, that will be installed this year, $250,000. Bike lane tap grant total is $511,000. With the TAP grant paying $409 of that. The LWCF development grant for $500,000. That's for bathroom, the actual infrastructure for bathrooms at Veterans Park, and the Veterans Park Hamtramck Stadium grant for $300,000. That's a tremendous amount of work, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to turn the page and see more. Bureau of Justice Assistance, Patrick Leahy Bulletproof Vest Grant for Bulletproof Vest, $4,200. That outfits our police department with their bulletproof vests. A National Fish and Wildlife Grant for tree planting, $130,000. Alley repair, this is the one that we worked with Representative Ayash on, $750,000. Those alleys will be completed this year. Our COPS grant for hiring of the 3 officers, $434,000. That's for community policing, and that the police chief applied for that, and we're interviewing for positions. And as soon as we can have qualified applicants, we will hire and have community-oriented policing. Our residential emergency water assistance, $112,000. The SEMCOG GIS grant for $10,000. Sterling Services donated, that's a business over off of Kniff. They gave $1,000 to the fire department for equipment, direct grant. And that's, when you think about that, that's a lot of money that ordinarily we wouldn't have had for this city. We wouldn't have been able to plant trees. We wouldn't have had new bulletproof vests. We wouldn't have our alleys paved. So these are things that make a difference for the city. What are the areas of accomplishment that through the various budgets, through grants, what did the city accomplish in the last year? Every day we collect water, utility payments, we send out water bills, we fix things, we do things, we hire people, we do regular policing, we collect for property taxes, we distribute that money to the entities, we do all kinds of things in this city, code enforcement, assessing, but what are the extra things that happen because they're things that we want to accomplish? So ongoing, residential water filter distribution. We had 3 big distribution days, and now we give them out across the counter, the refills and new filters. We approved, and City Council approved, we submitted our Parks and Recreation Plan. So that makes us eligible on the previous page for the Land and Water Conservation $500,000 grant. Without having that recreation plan, we could not apply for those parks grants with the DNR. We're nearly done with Sarah Garrett Park. The final monument is on order, and they will do a final ribbon cutting. It's granite. Granite is in short supply, so it's going to take a long time, but it's on order. We've completed Salam Peace Park. That ribbon cutting was held. Many of you were at that. And so that's, a pocket park through a land donation. We've sold 4 vacant lots. The 2 that are going to be 2 homesteads. People have already submitted their plans, so those are gonna be new and raise the SEV of the city. That is a good thing. Soon as it thaws a little more, we're gonna put out for sale signs on the remainder of our vacant lots. Another person came and pulled an application and is in the process now. So one after another, we're gonna sell those vacant lots to people who wanna build homes and live here with us. We've appointed members to the boards and commissions. There were 23 appointments made in 2021. That means that we're fully staffing those. I know that right now we need 2 alternates on ZBA. So talk to your friends, talk to your constituents, 2 alternates on ZBA and 1 full-time plan commissioner we still need. So I've been talking to people. I encourage you to do the same. And we'll get these boards and commissions fully staffed and busy doing good work. We're nearly done with redevelopment ready city. It's been a 4-year project to get us redevelopment ready. We're continuing with that. I expect to see that done this year. We've updated signage in our city buildings to reflect our community. You know, we speak multiple languages. We need to communicate in multiple languages. We've planted hundreds of trees in the city, and today we were calling Kosciuszko Middle School because they're gonna partner with us to plant some trees. And I think that's a big part of it, is involving our youth, involving our community. We've installed an updated Veterans Memorial plaque in the main hallway of City Hall, thanks to our local veterans groups. And the plaque that commemorates who did it is arriving, I don't know, we got an email today.
Yeah,
We got an email today or yesterday about that, so that'll be installed commemorating who donated to that plaque. The city charter was amended to include term limits and residency requirements for mayor and council. That's a big deal. And what that will do is attract people to our city that want to live here and then have them find interest in being a part of the elected body. We've approved the establishment of the Shahid Minar Monument at Zussman Park. It's my hope that next year when we do International Mother Language Day, it will be with the new monument in place. So we've had cleanups. That's something that I know everyone here has participated in and will continue to support. Our Beautification Commission is getting ready to post their spring cleanup. We have piloted the speed hump program. We're out to bid right now for additional speed humps. That will come back to you to award additional speed humps in the city. And, you know, I thank the city council and Councilman El Samiri who brought that forward, because without bringing those things forward, they don't get done. We've had several meetings. The school, the Hamtramck Public Schools, has agreed to fund half of the speed humps for the next go-round around their school buildings, and I'm hoping that our charter schools will act in kind and want to do the same. Because if we get that around all the schools, that'll be a significant investment this year. We re-implemented street sweeping, and when weather breaks, that will start again. We've updated numerous ordinances and our American legal documents. Now when you go on American Legal, that's where our documents are. Don't just Google Hamtramck ordinances. Go to American Legal. You will see the current ordinances. All the old ones are stricken, the new ones, the updates with the dates. For anybody who's interested in doing anything in Hamtramck, it is fully updated, and I appreciate Rana and Max for keeping that so. Alley improvements, ongoing. We'll be doing that $750,000 plus $250. That's $1 million worth of alleys are scheduled for this year. And, you know, my belief is we should continue on that trajectory. This is the time to keep going. The city stopped investing in our infrastructure for decades, and now we're making up for that. But $1 million investment this year is a big deal. Signage, honorary street naming for Dr. Al-Ghazali. And then also I put ongoing next to the mayor because the signs are supposed to come in this week. So we'll schedule an install for Mayor Karen Majewski, Winfield Street. Road improvements, the list is long. I gotta thank our Department of Public Services for cooperating on the Conant and Caniff, as well as the side streets that were improved in the last year. The CED department created a multilingual business resource guide. It was launched at the citywide merchant meeting that was held. Very good attendance at the hall on Holbrook, Yazle Hall. And, I think one of many to come. And that's, those are extra things that are done to make our community a home so that people feel welcome here. We modified permit fees during the flood day for 60 days after it flooded. People didn't have to pay the permit fees for things like the furnace, their hot water heater, et cetera. It was the least the city could do. And when I mean that, we did a lot of things to help with flooding. The fire department, the Department of Public Services did a lot of work. Some of our individuals, the chief, our director of safety and services. The chief continues to work with FEMA on our application there for some relief. And it's never ending. And, to that end, hosting and having FEMA and the Small Business Association in this building for our residents was a big deal. People got relief. Not everyone, because you have to submit the paperwork, and that's something that is really hard to make sure you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, but people who did that truly received the benefit of that. We, in our finance department, Susan Hendricks traveled to Lansing to amend our emergency loan note, savings of $10,000. That doesn't sound like much. But those are the kind of dollars that we're looking for every day. That if we can get $5,000, $10,000, $1,000, it makes a difference in the life of our residents. We updated our OPEB and MERS pension for GASB, and that's an ongoing thing. In order to do governmental accounting standards, you gotta stay current. And so, that's part of what happens that is behind the curtain and behind the scenes. The assessing department is to be applauded, and I know you've heard this before, but our AMAR, our audit of minimum assessing requirements, the city of Hamtramck received 100% perfect score. What does that mean? That means our properties are assessed correctly. So when you hear people talk about their taxes or something being out of whack, according to the state of Michigan, we've done it 100% correctly. We're always willing to talk with people across the counter, to see them at March Board of Review, but our methodology is correct for the city of Hamtramck. Ongoing. During COVID and before, we started with our DivDat machine so that people would have a convenient, no-contact way to pay their bill, either here at City Hall or at locations all over Metro Detroit. They could pay their utility bill, their property taxes, get building permits. We're still working on the income tax component, but expect that we'll be able to do that as well. People should be able to bank with the city 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and we're trying to make that convenient. It takes a lot of pressure off the Treasurer's Department and their window. And so for that reason, if people can use that kiosk, it's work for him to balance that and import that, but at the same time, it allows people a convenient way, if they're not available from 8 to 4 to pay their bills. It's very nice. It's 21st century things that Hamtramck has not done before. Let's see, we've done website improvements, multilingual updates on documents on our website. We've done staff and council training, respectful workplace, diversity, parliamentary procedure, Open Meetings Act. We meet all the time with our federal officials. Congresswoman Lawrence is coming to our council meeting in a couple months. Our state officials, that Representative Ayash and Senator Hollier, we have a constant dialogue with them. I spoke with Representative Ayash today. Our county officials, they're in my office, I'm in their office, because we don't do this alone. Hamtramck City Council, Mayor, we don't do this alone. If we don't have those partnerships with the state of Michigan, with the governor's office, with the Department of Treasury, we'll fail. And so taking time to do that is an important piece of my job. Lead service line replacement. Bill, he's a rock star, making this happen for our community, continuing to stay on it, that it's current, that we're going to the next phase. I got to commend Hennessy Engineering for working closely with the city. and getting it done. Because our goal is that we are done sooner rather than later. And so we're gonna continue on that, and you'll get regular updates on that. Sidewalk replacement, we did $100,000 worth of work. We pay for that out of one of our enterprise funds, and that was done on the south end primarily. And we'll move to the next phase, the next budget year. We've had 5 college interns working in Hamtramck. Free labor. It's free labor, and they do real work. We had Gabby, Ahmed, Allison, Mary, and Francesco, and we're interviewing again for more college interns that want to get that municipal experience, understand what we do. We paved the McDougal City parking lot, which was a big deal. It's nice now, and it ought to be. We ought to have decent parking lots in our city that are city-owned. Our primary and general election, first-time clerk Rana Faraj did a wonderful job. Historic number of AV voters and in-person voting, had more voters than we've ever had in Hamtramck. A lot of that is thanks to you, going out and activating our community and saying it's important to have your voice heard. You know, I've always told people, I'll listen to all of your complaints, but you can complain with your vote as well. And if you vote, then you have every right to complain about something that's going on. So thank you for encouraging voters in our community, and a huge thanks to our clerk and her staff, Abe and Barry, as well as all of the election workers. I see nothing but good things coming out of that department going forward, and they're to be commended for that. I put in here the lead service line grant, the replacement grant, $3 million. You know, we just acted on that. The drinking water infrastructure grant, $1.1 million. Ongoing water filter and filter replacement distribution, water meter installation. We still have around 500 water meters that are not updated in homes. It's been an ongoing process, but there's some people who don't want us in their homes. But in order to get an actual bill, you need to have an updated water meter, or they're gonna continue to get estimated bills. And if they ever sell their house, we'll come in and figure out how much they used, and then they'll get a big bill. So if you can do anything to encourage your constituents, if they don't have an updated water meter, to call the public service department, and we'll get right over there, we'll install a new meter, and they'll get actual bills, but not estimated. So, you know, for people to get estimated bills, it's hard to know what they're really using, but we don't want them to fall behind. Our WRAP program for utility bill payment assistance. It's $25 off a month on your utility bill, plus you can get one-time payments on any past due, and we have a lot of people with past due. We only have 281 people who enrolled in that program. In our entire city, 281. I would guess that there's at least 4,000 families that would qualify for this. It's simple. You do the paperwork one time, you stay current with your water bill, and you get $25 a month off, and they'll pay your arrearages. We advertise it all the time, but talk to your constituents. We repaired and replaced fencing at the tennis futsal court at Veterans Park. They either trimmed or removed 98 diseased trees, which is nice in our city. It prevents us from having any kind of problems when tree branches fall on cars or on homes. COVID vaccine clinic, you had to walk through one to get to your chair today. That's still going on. We've hosted them both at Zussman Park and right here in City Hall. We had them on the first floor, but now that we've renovated the council office, they've moved to the second floor. So they'll be here as long as needed. They want to stay through the October, May? May. So they'll be here for sure through May. Ongoing and continuing with Mayor Golub is our weekly communication updates to the community. The community really likes that. They get to watch that later. They might not watch it live, but they watch it later. I hear about it all the time. I heard about it with the former mayor. I hear about it with you. People will say, what did he mean when he said this? Or, hey, I didn't know that. And so the more we beat the drum about the things that are going on in the city, sometimes it's the first time someone's heard it, you know, when you say it. Sometimes they heard it again and again, but in order for us to communicate with everyone, we need to keep doing those kind of things. You know, we send out a newsletter quarterly with the utility bill. We post things on Facebook. We put things on our website, but there's so many different ways to communicate. We need to hit all of those. And there it is, frequent and regular Facebook and website posts on COVID info, food distribution. We were doing that daily during the height of COVID, which at one time someone said, boy, it's really quiet around City Hall during COVID. You guys must not have much to do. What's the answer to that? There was way more to do. I mean, without a pandemic, we had plenty to do then. Then you throw a pandemic on top of it. Everyone's jobs, reaching out and getting the CARES Act money, applying for different grants that became available, going to stores and making sure they understood what was going on, going around the community and speaking about the pandemic, about masks, about, you know, all of those things really took a lot of time, and it was worthwhile time. But it's something that was an additional duty for our staff. The Human Relations Commissions held a blood drive over at the community center. Ongoing getting personal protection equipment for staff, community. I want to thank the building or the public service department and our community safety and services putting up these dividers. Each of the offices have a piece of plexiglass to protect the department. Without them doing that, we wouldn't have been able to reopen City Hall as quickly as we did. We weren't closed that long. We added an additional drop box for no contact payments, permit applications, etc. People drop things in, and now that's become habit. Instead of in Hamtramck, instead of using the U.S. mail, you drive by and you drop something for City Hall right out front. People do walk in and drop it in the foyer as well. We had COVID reporting and testing for staff. That was an HR function, constantly reporting to the county as a public body when we had an individual that tested positive. We have to report to the county. Schools had to do it. All public entities have to do it. It takes a lot of work to send out the email first to staff, to go clean the offices, to make sure that if you were sitting next to the person that you were informed, and then do reports to the county. And that's still ongoing. That has not ended. Coordinate mobile vaccine for our residents. Ashley in my office was the one that coordinated that. For anybody who couldn't get out of their home, we sent a van to their home. The nurse went inside, gave the vaccine, came back in 2 weeks to do the second one. So that was something, a function of the city. We distributed air filtration fans. We took them all over the community into the schools. And we, again, have the vaccine clinic here in City Hall. Partnerships. We can't do things alone. So these are all things I want to bring up. Why is this part of the budget conversation? And it might sound like I'm a talking bobblehead right now. But this staff, I'm proud of them for what they do. And this is the function of some of the things are budgeted items, some of them are grants, some of them are just things we do because it's the right thing for a city to do. And I think it's important to look back as you're planning next year's budget to say, do we want to do more of this? Do you want to do less of this? Is this what you want to focus on? Or do you want to choose something else that we haven't thought of? So who are our partners? We have an ongoing relationship with the Hamtramck Parks Conservancy. Two of our staff members, Susan Hendricks and Conrad Majars, sit on that board, along with two members from the school, Nabil Nagy and Sherry Lyman. They sit on it along with community members. And that Conservancy Board meets once a month, and that is the good work of this City Council for the creation of the Conservancy to protect our green space, both that the schools own and that the city own here in Hamtramck. Ongoing conversation with Wayne County for construction at the historic Hamtramck Stadium. There's not a week goes by that I don't have a conversation about that structure and what's going on there. Ongoing conversations with the Friends of Historic Hamtramck Stadium. You know, there were a lot of amenities added to the baseball diamond. We started with the upkeep at the diamond. Now there are benches there are batting cages. The programming that you approved will be happening this summer until the conservancy director takes over. We've named the baseball field at the rear of the park, all the way at the rear, the Art Pinky Darris Field at Veterans Park. So that is going to have a big improvement this year. Little League, local Little League is played there, as well as Pell contests. We had the installation of the signage for the Ukrainian Heritage Neighborhood. I couldn't be prouder that we did that. You know, to think about Hamtramck recognizing the contributions of our friends from the Ukraine. And now we have that neighborhood, and the mayor has issued a proclamation supporting Ukraine. That'll be on your next agenda, but it'll be on Facebook tomorrow and on our city website, just supporting Ukraine and what's happening there today, unfortunately. We completed, I mentioned earlier, having FEMA and the small SBA here at City Hall for several weeks. You know, that was in cooperation with Congresswoman Lawrence's office. She held an open meeting downriver, and I attended, and there was conversation about FEMA and what FEMA can do, and I said, why can't they come to Hamtramck City Hall? Our people don't leave Hamtramck. We had a lot of flooding, and in a matter of 2 weeks, Max and I attended that meeting, and in a matter of 2 weeks, both FEMA was here, SBA was here, servicing our constituents. So that was a big deal, and I thank Max for doing a lot, Rana for coordinating this room and what work it took to have them here. You know, it's not easy to host somebody in our building all the time, because we are cramped. But when it's important to our residents, we're gonna do it, just like we have income tax in here on Mondays. The GM Student Corps, that's something that started the first year I was here. We continue to work with them on citywide improvements. It's the best of the best kids that come and come out of Hamtramck Public Schools and want to learn more about government. One of the projects they always do is at Veterans Park. They clean up the very front of it. They've done things at the school. They've done things for the city, and it's important work. A big thing that I think that took a really long time, and I want to thank Allen Brothers Law Firm for guiding us through it, as well as a lot of individuals, Bill Meyer for one, and the agreement regarding the Yemeni mural and the sale of the vacant lots and the memo of understanding between Hamtramck and community groups. That took a series of meetings that, boy, I thought would never end, but we finally did get to the finish line. And Allen Brothers drew up an agreement, we all executed it, and now the property exchanges have taken place, and it's time for the community groups to move forward on deciding what that front lot looks like and whether it will be a tribute to the Yemeni people and Yemeni culture. So as far as the agreement between the city, the vacant lots were sold and the money changed hands, and now it's time, it's go time for that lot. So I hope that some of you will take that mantle on. We translated a lot of documents with an MEDC, Redevelopment Ready, community goal, their translation services. We were able to do that. You're going to be seeing this year, we were awarded the DIA grant for Inside Out. We had that several years ago. We'll get it again. It was approved and received, but now it's putting the reproductions of famous masterpieces all over our city so that people who ordinarily don't get downtown to the Institute can see what art looks like and maybe pique their interest. We'll have some programs related to that. Our next 2 pages, I think, are real important. And I typically ask a couple of our department heads that do tremendous work to give me something about their department that they're proud of. And Police Chief Moyse offered the training accomplishments. It's 2 pages of training that all members of the Hamtramck Police Department and our Director of Community Safety and Services complete over the months in a year. And these are the modules that they worked on. These are the modules that they've completed, and these are the modules that make us a wonderful department. So I want to applaud our police chief and our police department, because without them taking these classes, they put us at risk, and these are the things that make them good police officers, and that's important to our community. I'll read a few of them. I think de-escalation for both the law enforcement and our telecommunications, emergency operations and planning for our schools, ethical leadership, ethical issues for law enforcement, how to do courtroom testimony, how to use the body cam and electronic recording consideration, autism awareness. They also distributed to each of the cars autism materials in the vehicles, bags, that if they encounter a person with autism, that they'll have the supplies they need to communicate. Clear thinking training, racial profiling, and making sure that that's not what we do. Effective use of force versus just any use of force. How use of force can cause liability for our city. Active shooter training, legal updates, professionalism, school safety, understanding violence, team building for the command staff, implicit bias for law enforcement. I think some of you attended that with us. Those are huge accomplishments, and I want to applaud our department. Proud of them every day, every day. Thank you, Chief. Fire department accomplishments. They did mask fitting with the Detroit Fire Department at cost savings. They improved the ISO rating, and that's what is the judgment of what our insurance rates are. And they've achieved a class 3, which is an excellent achievement. Only 9% of departments reach that, cities reach that, and our department worked hard to make that happen. The Fire Prevention and Safety Grant, nearly $15,000 for pre-fire planning software, a tablet and a tough book. That's something our fire marshal is inputting data into today. 34 additional smoke detectors given out to residents. They distributed winter coats to Hamtramck Public School Coat for Kids program. They had a high school senior job shadowing. Part of what we need to do more of is interest people in public work. Not a lot of people say, when I grow up, I want to be a city manager. When I grow up, I think I want to be a fire department firefighter or a police officer. So when we open our doors and we let people job shadow, like when I mentioned those interns, that's a time when people say, you know what, that might not be a bad career for me to look at. And so having that 40 hours of job shadowing, I'm hoping that high school senior says, I'd like to join the Hamtramck Fire Department. What does it take? They, in the height of COVID, a typical thing that happens regularly is there are fire department tours. The school children come over, they get a tour. Unfortunately, during COVID, we weren't able to do that, so the fire department created a video that was shown in the public schools. And so, that gives that fire prevention message to school children, and we don't want to lose that during the pandemic. Any questions about any of that? I should have stopped a little, instead of being a talking bobblehead here. Was there anything that you wanted to ask questions about thus far?
I think I have a few questions. In the first few slides, we had a grant of 500,000 something for bike lanes. Chapter.
That'll be installed this summer.
So that sounds like a lot of money for something.
It
that
does.
will cost down, right?
Well,
Bike lanes cost a lot of money.
It's-
Does that?
Yeah.
It
because
does.
It's all new paint and then all of the protective stuff, and are we getting any concrete barriers?
We're getting, at the bus stops, we have, there's a lot of engineering goes into it. Goes through MDOT, it goes through Wayne County, a lot of checkpoints to make sure it's safe, because you want to make sure that a cyclist can coexist with vehicular traffic. So there's a lot of safety enhancements that happen. It sounds like a lot of money, but we're going the entire length of Joseph Campo
So it's just Joseph Camp.
for now. We have a quote for Holbrook, for part of Holbrook, but we don't have the money for it, and it's very expensive. But I would like to have bike lanes from where the city, near Yazal Hall, right in that area where the city starts, so that people that are in the large businesses at that intersection will find their way to Hamtramck. There's a lot of young professionals that ride their bicycle to work, and I'd like for them to come to Hamtramck for their lunch or come to Hamtramck for their groceries. So that's a future. We're looking for money for that as well.
Now, and another thing, when you mentioned the Department of Public Service, they remove trees and stuff, I just remember that 2 days ago, a lady called me that they have a dead tree that's about to fall in the street to Masjid, next to Masjid Ali, what's it called,
Homes.
Yeah, she said, I think the address is 2694, and she told me to contact you because the tree is about to fall at any moment. And then she explained the water get collected next to that area and get frozen, so I think we should.
So I see Bill writing down the address, and so when we look at trees, one of the things we want to do is preserve the good ones, and we would trim them if they have dead branches or something. It may not be the whole tree that's diseased or dead or rotten. So a professional arborist reviews it, looks at it, and takes the least invasive steps. Because the first thing we want to do is we want to have shade in our city. It's good to have shade. We'll trim. As a last resort, we remove. When we remove, then you see we're planting too, to try to make up for that. And we will mark the areas where we remove trees and try to add additional. You know, we have certain areas that we've written grants to put trees in, but we also like to replace from the exact area where we remove them.
I just hope that I got the address right. I think it's 2694. It's very close to the mosque, so it should be obvious.
All right, thank you.
There's one more thing, please.
Yes.
When we talked about the police training, I was contacted by a person whose son is very, he has a schizophrenia, he has impulsive control disorder. He is out of control, under supervision 24 hours by his dad. His dad has to quit working and just supervise him. So he comes to the clinic frequently for violent actions. And so I think he harassed the lady, and she contacted the police for sexual harassment, and then they put him in jail for 3 days. I think he's like 18 or 19 years old. And then they gave him a court date, and now he's going through all this stuff, and they just ignored the fact that he's not, he's mentally ill.
So maybe you can have a conversation with the chief about that privately, and she can look what the situation is about. The police department has certain steps they have to follow when someone makes a complaint and when they discover what's going on. So she could meet with you privately and go over that particular situation, or if that individual, you said the father is always with the
24 hours. He had to quit work because the kid needs supervision.
So-
When they put him in inpatient psychiatry, they call the police. His family will call the police when he gets violent at home. Take him to the hospital. He'll stay for a few days there. He would be so quiet in there. He wouldn't talk. And then they would be like, he's good. Send him out. When he gets out, he starts his violent.
Yeah, and mental, we spoke about that at our last council meeting, how serious mental illness is. When someone has cancer, we're raising money and running races for them and, posting ribbons, and mental health issues sometimes get swept under the carpet. So I'm glad his family's taking care of him. Chief can meet with you, maybe, if there's some follow-up to see the family, to guide him through the court process or help him out, we would want to do that. Thank you.
That's all.
Well, add to another tree, and it's Oliver Street. It looks like it's about to end its life. It's a big tree. It's a huge tree.
Councilman, if you can send me that address,
I
I'll
will.
get it to Bill tomorrow. That would be good.
And then also you mentioned about the Yemeni mural that's on Joseph Campo. Are you referring, is it to the lot next to it?
So what happened was we had a memo of agreement and a contract. The city owned a lot at the rear next to the alley. A private individual owned the lot next to it, and we ended up doing a trade of the property so that that lot on the front, that fronted Joseph Comple was not developed, but that the rear two properties could be developed. And there were a series of things that we had to accomplish in order to make that happen. And that agreement is signed and done. Now it's up to the community to decide, and the community group, how that front parcel is developed. And the goal was that it would be a Yemeni park, and it would, be a tribute to the Yemeni culture here, and an educational place, a place of peace and solitude. And then the two rear parcels are now owned by individuals that can pull building permits and do what they need to do to develop the commercial property that they wanted to.
Okay, so that means, I know it's owned by the city, correct?
Excuse me?
The lot's owned by the city?
The city doesn't own anything anymore
Nothing
there. Mm-mm.
Okay, so, and then the community itself, they have to decide what they're gonna do with that,
Correct,
and not the city.
correct.
Okay.
There's a long-term lease agreement for that front parcel. If you wanna see the terms of that, I'd be happy to share it with council. If I find my pen, I'll write that down to send it to you. 'Cause I think only the council members that were seated last year know all the details of it. I don't know where it went. Oh, here it is. Thank
I
you.
have a quick question that might be easy and might not be easy, so I'll make it as easy as possible. Like, for the police training, is this like a normal year of training, or did you do a lot more, or?
A little bit of both. Most of it is we do monthly mandatory training that everybody has to complete. And then there are other classes that officers can request to go to.
Okay,
And those requests are granted. There's other opportunities that come up that we send people to, but you will see that similar list from last year, about that same length. But we did, we find as other training opportunities come up, we make sure that we put those in as well.
awesome, yeah, I heard you say monthly before, and then I was like, this is definitely not monthly.
Yeah, there's
so-
a lot more into that, because it's not just one class a month. It's,
Right.
multiple
Okay,
classes in a month.
thank you.
And I think the big thing is that it's ongoing. You're gonna see, next year when you get this list, you're gonna see some of the same classes repeated, but it's kind of like what we do in regular life. You continue to do these so that it becomes second nature. Okay, so now I gotta find where I left off.
We're at the bottom of it.
Okay, looking ahead. So this year, we'll complete those bike lanes, some additional CANIF reconstruction, the ribbon cutting at the Sarah Garrett. I hope that monument will be in, and that will complete that. Continue all staff training, and continue the complete review and codification of city ordinances. And that's something that it's going to take some third-party intervention in order to do that. I'm looking for grant money, because what I want to do with our ordinances, and I think you'll think is important as well, is to make sure that they're not, that we don't have ordinances that say one thing in one place and something different in another place. So we need to do a full comparison, and that's something that's difficult for one individual to do. We need to, get them all in Word and make sure that we're looking at every single page of those. That's gonna be a 2-year project.
The last time we did it was 14 years ago, I believe.
Yep.
And we were digging out boxes from the basement, just to see what we did was we compiled everything that was there and passed a code that has now been amended several times, some of which, when I wasn't here for 5 years. So
Yeah.
it's time to redo that process.
And you know that at our next council meeting, we're gonna do some pieces of that. And some of them had to be done immediately, because they were just so bad. And then, but looking at it from the first page to the last page, we're gonna take a couple years to do that. And we'll do that through the plan commission, but not all of them are ordinances that affect the plan commission. Some of them are other places, so that'll be a complete team effort. Plus, we're gonna hire an outside consultant. And right now, that's me looking for money for that. So once I find that money, it's gonna be all system go on that one. And we won't bring them to you until we have a nice comprehensive ordinance. And that'll take time for you to read through it as well. But we'll be looking for some subcommittee members. Okay, general fund budget 5-year forecast. I'm gonna end up turning this over in a minute to our CFO. But we're gonna talk through a few things first. So what is a 5-year forecast? This is something that gets beat up all the time. But I want you to understand that what we do is we have to act on what we actually know, what's historical data, and what we can project with reasonable assurance. And I'm saying this, and you heard a little bit about that last week. You heard a little bit about that on February 1st when we did our initial budget meeting. Sometimes you will find that a council member, a community member will say, wait a minute, I heard that you're gonna get this or that, and I didn't see that in your budget. Hearing it doesn't mean we can put it in a budget. Hearing it doesn't mean we can put it in a 5-year forecast. We have to go on the facts we know today, and then we can plan ahead. So once in a while, we'll say to you, hey, we heard this, but we can't put it in the budget yet. You know, just so that it takes care of your fear that we're not doing it right. We'll always be conservative. We don't ever want to predict more revenue than what you're really going to have. And I'd love to be wrong on that. I don't like to be real wrong, but I'd like to be that next year somebody gives us an extra $1 million that we didn't expect, and then that changes the picture. Because we're going to be conservative and make sure you don't overspend the city's money. So that's what you're gonna see in the budgets when they come your way. Challenges and opportunities. This is really important, and because we have so many new members on council, I think this is really important. I did not do this kind of a page in our last budget, because it was council members that came we were here year after year after year, the same folks. But I want you to see, and I want to take a little time on these. The first bullet point is GM. So we know that they're going to expand. You know, I've got the word that they're gonna have expanded shift production in 2022. Couldn't make me happier. But I want you to see what the trend has been like. Fiscal year 17, we received $908,000 from the GM plant operating. That was our portion of the money. Detroit got 2/3 of it, we get 1/3. 18, it goes down to $612,000. 19, it goes down to $587,000. 20, it goes down to $440,000. 21, $214,000, and we get that a year in arrears. 21, or I think I put a 21, that's not what I wanted that to be. A 22, we'll see what it's going to be, we don't know. Now look at the swing there. It's $700,000 difference between 17 and 21. What did we have to take out of our budget when we didn't get that money? That's a big deal. The Dickerson Jail Facility. Every year we get between $1.1 and $1.2 million. Every year. If you ever drive on 75, you see the new jail being built. Last week, they were doing these windows over here. This week, they're working on this side. I watch that every day. I watch the progress of that jail facility. Right now, the only thing going on in Dickerson is some food prep, and they're putting on some ankle bracelets. That's about it, isn't it? There's no prisoners there. I don't know what our check's gonna be like this year, because it's based on prisoners being housed in that facility. It's a pilot agreement. Payment, pilot. Payment in lieu of taxes. That's what that stands for. Payment in lieu of taxes. And our payment in lieu of taxes for this facility is between 1.1 and 1.2 million annually.
Just so everybody understands, the reason it's a pilot as opposed to property taxes is that the county, as another governmental entity, does not pay property taxes. When the jail was developed back in the 80s, nobody wanted it in the county, and they had to pay somebody to put it somewhere, and Mayor Kozarin and then Assistant County Executive Duggan negotiated that agreement for the payment in lieu of taxes. We've litigated over it at least twice, or no, one time in 2005, 2006. You know, once it stops operating as a jail, the pilot agreement says that, you know, that the payments continue as long as it's operated as a jail. So once it ceases to operate as a jail, there's no contractual obligation on the part of Wayne County to fund it as a pilot, and Wayne County has no obligation to pay property taxes because it's a governmental entity.
So that's $1 million plus to our general fund budget.
So the entire building, there's no prisoners in there?
No, they're putting ankle bracelets on right now and preparing some food there. So I don't know what's going to happen with that property. It's very clear to the Wayne County administration that whatever they want to do with that piece of property, that Hamtramck needs it to be $1 million revenue for us. We cannot lose that money. So if they sold it to somebody and the person didn't develop it and it was privately owned, the taxes that it would bring in maybe would be $25,000, maybe. That's a far cry from $1 million. So we really need it to be something fabulous that goes there. And there's a lot of interest in it because of where it's at. Logistically, it is at the 94 corridor. Easy on, easy off, right there. Hamtramck Drive in Kona. It's a great location. So we need for Wayne County to really be attentive to that. And we have beat the drum on that as much as we possibly can. So that's something that is very scary for our community. And for what Jim mentioned, people don't want prisons in their community. They don't want jails in their community. They don't want the bad guys housed in their neighborhood. So Hamtramck, to their credit, did take this on, kind of in a remote area, and it served our budget well for many years. MERS, they had the vote today in the House on the pension liability. There is zero interest in moving it in the Senate that I'm aware of. I'm going to be reaching out to Mike Shirkey tomorrow to see if we can drum up some support for it. I met with him 2 months ago on lead service lines, not at all about pension, because I didn't even know this was in the works, but he'll get a contact from me tomorrow. So Councilman El Samiri would know this, but you may not. A few years ago, we did a 10-year smoothing with our MERS pension liability. We received a bill from MERS for triple of what our obligation was. There was a 3-time multiplier, and we would have had extremely high pension annual bill that we could never have afforded. So Susan and I worked with MERS to have them do an actuarial and put together a schedule where we could have, that we chose from, to do a 10-year smoothing. So in fiscal year 21, you see on this third bullet point, our obligation was $5.1 million. Fiscal year 22, $5.4 million. That's the year we're in right now. Fiscal year 23, you're going to see nearly $5.7 million just for pensions obligation in the next budget. So when I bring you the budget, that is going to be in there, and that's a fixed number that nobody can change. And we do have a presentation coming from MERS as well, so that you understand that. That's our pension obligation to retired people that have worked for the city. The Whitmer budget is calling for an increase. She asked for 5% of the legislature. They haven't voted yet, so we don't know what it's going to be. She asked for a 5% increase. We'll find out. This year, you're going to see increased EMS costs. Our base annual went from 0 a few few years ago to 144,000, that is in our current budget, annual, and now we've had to, because of the increase in the amount of runs in Hamtramck, we've had to add a peak time ambulance. So that was approved. That's costing about 15,000 a month. I just met with them and asked them to look at what would a second ambulance cost full-time instead of just a peak time at this price. So they're working the numbers on that. And you've heard us talk before that we've met with the fire department about seeing about bringing EMS back in-house and what, you know, what kind of an agreement we could come up with that. And that remains to be seen. Income tax fluctuation. So we have been ramping up. At the beginning of, or 18 year, we did nearly $2.7 million in income tax collection. Then in 19, you know, working hard, we're at $3 million in income tax collection. And then in fiscal year 20, we're back to 2.6 million. 21, 2.6 million. And then, you know, we do refunds between about 115,000 to a little over 150,000. We have not recovered from COVID. Some people still aren't working. Some are never going to go back to work. And when the governor changed the deadline for filing, I think it confused some people. This year's filing deadline is April 30th for city tax. You know, if everybody pays their fair share of city tax, we'll get to that $3 million mark or better if everybody pays their fair share. But you can see that it's down about $400,000. That's a lot of money. Questions? Yes.
On the two state legislature ones, is there anything that the people at this table can do to help push for some of those? Because, you know, the pension one would solve, well, a good amount of our issues.
It would.
And so I briefly spoke to Eli Ash about it, and he's hesitant.
He
to
voted yes
support it.
today.
And I'm glad to hear that, because he was like, I'm reading it, and I have some hesitations, and so that was something, but I know Stephanie, we were at Stephanie Chang's event, and so she was also hesitatingly supporting of it, so it's.
Yeah, because, you know, one of the things with legislation, it's not always clean. It's not always just voting on, hey, let's give some money, let's take $1 billion and apply it to all of these municipalities. There's always little pieces of other things in there that benefits somebody or puts a person who votes yes or no in some situations in a trick bag. And then it's used for election day fodder. So unfortunately, that's the way it works in Lansing and in Congress. So it was a difficult vote to vote yes for this for our legislators. It was a difficult vote because it's going to be used as election day. You know, it'll be on some pieces of literature going around that what the other sidecars were. What can you do? If you know a Republican senator, reach out to them, because that's where it's going next. It needs 20 votes in the Senate in order. And then once it gets some traction in the Senate, governor already knows we need it to pass. But I don't know what they'll put on that bill in the Senate, if they'll throw some more things on it to make it not what everyone can vote for. So it'd be nice if it was stripped down to just a pension bill. If it was stripped down to a pension bill, I think everybody would vote for it. But yeah, so that one. The governor's budget, same thing. You know, if the 5% came true, that would be wonderful. And of any year it could, this year it could. So same thing, you know. They'll vote on their, I hope they'll vote on their budgets before they break for summer this year. But they have until September 30th to vote on that. But my hope is that they'll vote sooner. Any other questions? Okay. The other challenges and opportunities, and some of them you're gonna like and some of them you're not. We've already eliminated retiree health care, and that saved us about $850,000 a year. When Brian Camalier from Plant Moran gave his overview, and when he said, you've done everything you can do, That's one of the big things that they're pointing to. And other communities have called us to talk about that. Right now, the one next thing we're gonna do is try to free up our HR department from having to do all the paperwork with this and send people in another direction with their healthcare purchases. Hopefully that will eliminate the workload in the HR department for our plus 65 people. And with the Affordable Care Act, there's a lot of places they can buy their health care. That's the beauty of it. So they might find a better deal somewhere else than through the city. Our risk management insurance has gone up. Nationwide civil unrest. When people gather and protest or support something in large groups and it gets violent, police are called in, and it has caused our insurance to go up because it generates lawsuits. And so our risk management insurance has had huge increases, 23 and 24% over the last couple of years due to that. We haven't received the numbers yet, but we do anticipate that it'll go up again this year. I need to go back to healthcare. They told us we're gonna have a 20% increase on our regular employee healthcare, to look at 20% for this year. We will do all the bidding around, checking the policies, et cetera. We work with a group called Meadowbrook who does comparisons with other carriers. My hope is that they told us that number high, and maybe it'll come in far less, but right now we don't know. I put a couple of things here that, you may not like, but they're challenges, they're opportunities, but when we talk about how do we raise revenue for this city, your ideas are important, but I'm gonna tell you the ones that could work. And whether they leave a bad taste in someone's mouth or are unfavorable remains to be seen. We could continue our parking plan and do a larger footprint. Right now, we're doing Joseph Campos, side streets and parking lots. If we expanded the program, that would be a possibility for more revenue. We don't do the south of Joseph Campos, we don't do in Holbrook, we don't do Conant, we don't do Kniff. There are other places we could do. That could be a revenue stream for the city. Our subcommittee is bringing back a report at the end of March. Maybe that will give you some insight to think about, but I want to put things out there. As a marijuana host community, we are going to, in March, learn how much money we get for hosting those 4 businesses in our community. Some communities are looking to marijuana as a source of revenue for their revenue poor city. That's a possibility for this community as well. Our city-owned lots, we'll continue the sale of those lots, and when we do that, the money does not come into our general fund. We, as a part of our Public Act 202 plan, have dedicated that money to our pension obligation. What I would hope by sending more money and selling more lots, that we would be able to lower our annual amount that we have to send to MERS. And you saw on the page prior that we're looking at 5.7 million going next year. If we can fund at $10,000 a lot and send that money, and people build houses and, raise the SEV of our community, that is a very, very good revenue stream for our city in 2 ways. ARPA funding, competitive grant opportunities, whatever is available, we are researching. I told you that I went to the state of Michigan and asked for money to fund a grant person. She's been on the job for a month and doing an excellent job, submitted her first application, has met a lot of the people in the ARPA realm, and I expect good things out of her going forward. But we will apply for everything we can. Okay, now I'm turning it over to Susan. She's gonna go over our 5-year forecast. You should have, do you have a white one like this too or not? No. Only blue? No. Okay. It's a little hard to read. I will send you a white copy of that tomorrow. Let me make a note to do that. But I'm gonna turn it over to Susan to go through some of these numbers with you.
Thank you. And I do understand it's hard to read, we're trying to get you all the data, and I didn't think you were gonna try to understand or digest it all tonight anyway. So, this 5-year forecast is really the one that was used, when Brian did his presentation last week. So, the numbers should go along with everything that was said to you by Plant Moran last week. It's focusing on the general fund. We've put the last two, so 2020 and 2021, the first two columns, that's actual what happened. The 2022 column is our adjusted budget. And then the remaining 5 columns are, as Kathy said, a forecast based on what we know the day we put it together. So forecasts are ever-changing documents. I put them together and had them need to be changed again the next day. As we get more detail or find out that something's more than a rumor, it's true and going to happen.
If you have time. We're only here till 7:30. We weren't
I
gonna
don't-
go
I think
deep,
it's fine.
Yeah.
we weren't gonna go deep in this today.
So it's
Thank you.
really just giving you the revenues and it all kind of consolidated together. We have a lot of revenues that we call property tax, a lot of different lines. We have a general fund millage, we have a police and fire millage, we have a rubbish millage. They're all just added in together, so you're only seeing one line, but it will give you an idea of what we receive from our residents for property taxes, income taxes, and the other revenue sources that we have. And then on the bottom part, it's showing the total appropriations by department. So it doesn't say exactly what we pay for each item in a department, but it tells you how much we spend on an office. How much does it cost to run the clerk's office for a year? How much does it cost to have the city manager's office for a year? As Kathy said, we are always conservative when we put these together. And though we want to give you as good of information as we can, we only tell you or put in the budget what we know we can support. It's a lot easier, and I would think you would like it better when we come back and say we received more revenue than we thought, so we get to increase revenue. Now we received less revenue than we thought, so now we have to figure out how to cut. So that's the approach that we take as we put these budgets together. You will see over the last couple of years, last year's is very easy. Revenues, if you compared it to the original budget, revenues came in about $1 million higher. And that was really because of the CARES Act money, that at the time we were putting the budget together, I don't think we even knew the acronyms for the CARES Act money yet. We probably all thought at that time that there was federal funding coming, but we didn't know what it was gonna be or how much. So it is not uncommon for us to come back, as you know, I come back once a quarter and let you know when things are changing. So we do get to come back and either identify new revenues or additional revenues, or sometimes we're able to reduce expenditures. Maybe we got a grant for something that we thought we were gonna do from the general fund, or we found another way to accomplish something, so we can make those changes.
Susan, the bottom line on this 5-year forecast, the very bottom line, I know it's hard to read. When we do the budget, the last couple of years, we've had to dip into fund balance.
Correct.
But by the time we get to June 30th, and that's the end of our fiscal year each year, the staff knows, you know, if we have $500 in their budget to buy paper and pencils and all of that, and I'm gonna use a real small one because it's very easy to say. And if they didn't spend that $500, maybe they spent $200 of that, that money returns back into the general fund. It's not like they get to keep the 500 and next year get another 500, et cetera. I wanna tell you about the people that are sitting here and then some of them that aren't. They don't rush to spend that money because it's there. They are very frugal. And we were out of whack. Those 2 audited years, the first 2 columns, were much worse. The CARES Act money saved us in the column 2, the CARES Act money. And in the previous year, that was gonna be a lot more of a dip into fund balance, but because of these department heads, we don't spend it all. We stop spending and do well with what we can. So I just wanna make that clear. When I bring a budget forward, it isn't, we're not gonna spend every penny of it. I wanna be very clear on that. We will not spend every penny of it. There will be money returned back to the general fund. Sorry to interrupt.
And I will say, in other places that I've worked, the last month of the year kind of becomes a purchase order frenzy, as every department head is trying to make sure that they spent every penny that was allocated to them. And, I mean, I have gone and opened a closet at the end of a month and it's just stocked full of things because they had money. That doesn't happen here. Even my first year here, I kept telling Kathy I was waiting for it to happen. It doesn't happen here. I mean, they will make purchases, but they need them. It's not.
Cut it off at a certain point. There's a certain point where we cut off purchasing unless it's an emergency. So, I mean, that's just how we do it here. And we're getting close, you know, I always promise 7:30, we're out the door. So,
Okay,
we're gonna go
so-
through these
Slides.
and allow for some questions.
So I think you saw this pie chart, but you show it again just to make sure everybody's seen it. This is looking at the revenues that we brought in or budgeted to bring in 2021, and how did we budget to spend the money. So you'll see the biggest piece, the big blue piece on the right, that's the cost of employees. So that's payroll, that's health insurance, that's retirement, it's anything that is a cost because we have an employee here. The pink piece is retirement, being that number that Kathy mentioned to you for next year at 5.7, and that is only going up for I think the next 5 or 6 years before it starts to come down as of right now. So that leaves only the green section, 27% of the total budget, to pay for everything else that we need to pay for here. That includes bond payments. We still have one ELB note with the state of Michigan, so we still have one bond that we're paying off. We only have 2 more years left to that, so there is an end in sight to it, but we do have to pay it next year. It's that risk insurance that Kathy showed you is going up 23, 24% per year lately. It's paying for the contracts that we have for EMS. Assessment Services is a contract. McKenna, our building department, is a contract. So that 27% is all that we have left to pay for all of those things beyond employees. Between retirement and payroll is the other part of our pie. And the last one, I know that Brian had the exact same slide, so real quickly, all it's showing, the dark blue is the revenues, the pink is the expenditures, so it's showing that our revenues are coming in under what we are needing to spend each year. And I think that's, one last one. This also, I believe, is a duplicate of one that Brian had put in his also, and that is showing what, with our current projection, if we don't do things different or make some changes, what will happen to the fund balance of the city. And you'll see somewhere mid-2023, we go into a negative fund balance, which along with that statement would be we go into a negative cash situation. So we never really could let that line get as low as it is because we want to have the cash to pay the bills. But if you assumed we did, that's what our trend would look like right now.
So, the next slide. So, what's next? We need to identify revenue opportunities. Flat out, that is something we have to do as a team. So I mentioned the parking meter footprint, marijuana revenue, and I don't even know what that's going to be, whether it'd even be worth it, but we'll know in the next couple of weeks. We might even know tomorrow what that revenue is, and as soon as I know, you'll know. The PA 345 millage on the ballot would relieve a lot of the general fund budget obligation. Right now, we're only doing a $0.5 collecting from the residents for our fire and police pension. And it does not, that's a little over $100,000 that we take in. Continue to promote the sale of the vacant lots. I mentioned that that's a double win. Number one, they build a house, we're collecting property tax. Number two, we're submitting that $10,000 to MERS for our pension obligation to reduce that annual amount. It takes a lot of $10,000 lots to reduce that $5.7 million though. You know, seeking the legislative remedy for the pension obligation, what are the other possibilities? So that's what you need to be thinking about as an elected official. What else? And then identify any opportunities to decrease expenditures. I think we're very, 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 very lean as far as what we spend. When we compare to other municipalities, they have a lot more people expenses, they have a lot more stuff, they have a lot more. So I'm open to your ideas and we'll, you know, do what we can to work together. I didn't change this on the bottom, I did on the last page, but I missed this one today. Our next budget meeting will be the 29th, and then that does show up on the very last slide, but I made a mistake and didn't correct it on that page. So now it's questions, comments. Is there anything that you would like us to put pen to paper and get the calculator out and look at a revenue opportunity that you've thought about? Or is there an expenditure that you'd like to know more about, that we could bring some information to you, share it with you before our next budget session? If there's anything you want to have have more information on, we'll prepare it.
Well, I would like, because our main budget and our main issue, it's a retirement, it's a pension. So how does this pension, I know, like, some cities or some big companies, they have the 401k, so how's the pension here for our city?
So we belong to MERS, the Michigan Employee Retirement System, and we have an obligation for employees that work here to pay their retirement once they leave employment with the city, after they're vested. So right now, there's some employees that are sitting in this room that 15% of what they make goes directly to pension. They fund themselves. 15% of their check goes right directly to MERS before they get their first dime. We have in our labor contracts various programs, whether there's a hybrid in the fire department, in the police department, for their contribution to their pension. What this is primarily paying for, the largest part of it, is people who are no longer working here. There are more people not working here that are getting that check than the people that are working here supporting paying into that system. So there's hundreds of workers that are no longer here that are getting a monthly check.
This accrued liability is really on our defined benefit plans that have been in Hamtramck for a long time.
Right, this is a 40-year problem. I mean, the city did not, Plant Moran last week talked about GASB 45. So prior to 2014, 2013, 2014, cities were not even reporting their liabilities on their balance sheets. They sure as heck weren't pre-funding, so the amount of money that we're paying now is because we underpaid into the pension system going back decades. So, the bills come due and, now you're paying for what you didn't, not for what you, but for what the city didn't pay for in the 1980s, 1990s, when some of these folks were still employed by the city. So this is a problem that's arisen over the course of many decades.
And I understand, but if we don't solve the pension issue, it will continue.
Right,
So
here-
if, as we speak today, we're paying for the pension. If we don't fix the pension now, our kids and grandkids will still continue having this issue. So if we don't have any ways or any ideas how we can work, and I know a lot of people will not like what I'm saying right now as regarding the pension, but it's something that's hurting the city, and if we don't have the money, there's no way we're able to continue paying these pensions for the people after, from today until 10 years ago, until 10 years after.
right,
So-
the bind that we're in is that those pension payments they are a vested property right of the employees who hold them. They're protected by both the United States Constitution and the Michigan Constitution. Absent a amendment to either, or to both of those documents, which probably isn't gonna happen, there's not a way around that. And of course, you wouldn't want that in the global scheme of our economy. If public employee pensions are not safe, then there is not an investment in our economy that is safe. So the full faith and credit of our governmental entities is the foundation of our economic system. And even if it wasn't, the rules still say that we can't breach the agreements that we made years ago for
What
these.
you're asking is about
retirees.
future employees.
Yeah.
So, and here's the
people who
dilemma.
aren't already vested.
Here's the dilemma for future employees. If you cut the pension benefits that are being paid to your current workforce, they're just gonna vote with their feet and leave. And you won't be able to retain well-trained, all the training that chief has done in the police department, that we've spent tens of thousands of dollars in hours and in actual going out to the people who provide that training, will be lost. And it'll be lost, every time we replace a firefighter, we have to buy new turnout gear because it's all custom made. That's a $4,000 proposition, just on that alone. So you're between the classic rock and a hard place if you cut too deeply into the pension plans of existing employees. They'll leave, and you can't, under constitutional law, cut the pension benefits of people who are already retired.
Yeah.
So,
And what about like in the future though, so like if we hired someone tomorrow?
So we have some hybrid.
Okay.
We have some hybrid. We also have employees who you heard me say, they're paying 15% of it. They're funding
Well,
themselves.
that's way more than I pay, so that's what,
They're funding
Yeah.
themselves.
So for our police and firefighters, those that have started here
There's a cut.
2013, mid-2013 timeframe,
Yes.
there's different dates in all of their contracts, but they're all around, there was we bridged, for those individuals, we bridged the old plans, and we created what's called a hybrid. So there's two components, there's a defined benefit and a defined contribution component to those. So those two divisions in MERS, I don't know off the top of my head, but they probably are not underfunded. They're probably real close to the 80% MERS wants to see. That's only police or firefighters that we hired after a certain time. We are actually getting, right now, I think, Chief, all of our patrol officers are in that newer pension plan. So we still have command officers here that are in the old one. There was nothing that really could be done to force them to move, but we're not continuing to put new police and firefighters into those extremely underfunded plans. We created new plans for them. I think that's what you were
yeah,
asking
so
for.
basically what you're saying is our current state we can afford.
We're
Only the problem is from the past.
We've done everything with MERS that we can do with current employees. We're doing it right. It's the past that we're paying for when you see $5.7
Yeah,
million.
that $5.7
So
million
what can we
is-
do with our pension? Number one, we're gonna beat the drawer down in Lansing, just like I spoke about that. Another avenue for the city is to pass a 345 millage. That would take the burden of police and fire out of our pension. That would collect from the taxpayers money for that. The concern you've heard about a judgment levy that happened in other communities here in Michigan is a real threat. It's a real threat. And, you know, I would rather solve this ourselves than have it be solved on the bench, quite frankly. So we'll see what happens. Lansing is one piece of it, but, you know, it's our community's problem. So let's see what happens in Lansing, and then we can look at that 345 again.
I don't know. 'Cause to
It's-
convince citizens
you're sitting in a
to
tough
increase
seat.
their,
You are
Yes.
sitting in a tough seat as an elected official of this community because you want the city to continue, but we've inherited, all of us in this room inherited this problem. None of us created it.
Look at the numbers. The residents are paying the same dollars today in actual numbers in property taxes that they were paying in 2003. That was at our first budget hearing. They're paying roughly the same amount in income tax with, you know, roughly, you know, 8,000 more residents than we had in 2003. They're paying the same amount in income tax. We can't raise income taxes because the state, again, has limited the amount that we can do on income taxes. So it's gotta come from somewhere, and if the state isn't gonna provide it, it's either gonna be a millage that is passed voluntarily, or it's going to be a judgment levy that's going to have the exact same effect.
Yeah. So. Yeah, and that's what
That-
they did.
That's correct. I mean, the gentleman's correct. I mean, if there is a judgment levy that is executed, then
They collect it all.
they will want it all in one fell swoop, as opposed to starting now and solving the problem gradually, where people aren't going to be hit with a massive burden.
Right. But it's today's taxpayers paying for the sins of, you know, people 25 years ago.
And that's the hard sell.
And there's not one person in this room that created that problem.
oh,
And they're paying for the sins of not doing infrastructure improvements and all kinds of other things that haven't been done because the money hasn't been there for,
Right.
you know, this is, you know, Hamtramck's been through emergency management going back to 1975, when the first emergency manager was appointed. So this is not a new, I was 5 years old when the first emergency manager was appointed. So this is, and it took time to get to to Ray Vojtovich's appointment. So there were problems going back to the 50s when the tapping fee into the Denton sewer line was going to be much more affordable. The residents in the 1950s decided, hey, we don't want to raise our taxes to engineer our sewers properly. Well, now we're 70 years after the fact, and it's much more expensive. So the more you kick the can down the road and don't bite the bullet, the more you're gonna have these problems.
no, just try to convince citizens, say, you know, it's like some citizens are willing, you know what, I'm willing to pay 500, even 1,000 to increase in my taxes. But it's that gonna go to services that I will benefit, or citizens will benefit, or is it gonna go to retirement? It just,
It's hard to it is hard to understand, but it's an obligation that the city owes. And unfortunately, it leaves, you saw the big piece of that pie that it takes out of our general fund budget. Imagine if we didn't have to pay that piece of the pie, what we could do for the residents, that they would feel it was something we're doing for them, not for retirees. So, any other questions before we break for tonight? And then we will be back March 29th. When you leave here, as you're talking to residents, as you're thinking and contemplating, if there's something you want us to research prior to bringing you, you're going to see budgets at the next meeting. So you're going to see actual budgets. These members will be here speaking on their budgets. We'll be speaking on them, going through what exactly they're going to do with the money that we're proposing. So that's when we get down into the nitty-gritty of this. So I hope we've provided a good foundation. Now it's start thinking about, what are those revenue sources? What expenditures do you think we could do better? And we're happy to research anything any idea you have. We'll spend the time to research, okay?
Find us money.
That's what I do every day. Every day, when I'm in a meeting.
Just call her up.
Yeah, we'll do that. All right, I just wanna thank the staff that came tonight. You know, this is about thanking you for the work you do, it matters. Some of our colleagues couldn't be here tonight to hear the, you know, the good things that we did for the year, so we'll make them watch this video. All right, thank you all for
Thank
being
you,
here
guys.
tonight.
Please have a good night.